Namo Myo Renge Kyo. Hi. Hope this finds you in good health, secure. That's one aspect. I was reminded this morning, something I listened to. One aspect of Sangha that is easy to miss. I think it's just a fact of our modern times, not to sound cliche, but all of these systems of human, our need, our craving for social structure, our tribal sense, right? Women, men, mixes, society, whatever. We have a desperate need. It's built into us to connect, to feel connected. And of course, it's no wonder, as Buddhists, we know that we are beneath the cellular level, right? At the energetic level, the formations level, we are connected. But to have a sense, a palpable sense of that connection in our social structures has been assailed repeatedly over the last hundreds of years, certainly in this era, right? The latter time of the law, as it were. And so Sangha can help bring us some of that sense of being, right? Larger than this body, this self. But our self begins to be defined also by our connection, our, you could say it's spiritual, but it's a connection like a vibration, like a frequency we share, yeah? But, we can use words, and I've heard it many times, I've used them myself. There are times in our lives when we feel really adrift. Those connections are very tenuous if we can't rely on them. And that's it's kind of a scary feeling. So when we like and subscribe and identify that this activity, this source, this resource of support and study, we're kind of identifying that validation of a connection. It may be tenuous. I mean, remember, we are this Sangha all over the world. But I guess I'll end that diatribe simply by saying how much I appreciate your participation. I know for me, it's incredibly nurturing to know that we're communicating and talking about Nichiren's incredible insights into Shakyamuni's ultimate teaching, and that you and I share this goal of enlightening the Gohonzon mind, experiencing Buddhaness, that it is equanimous, that you and I share this incredible vision. It's very fulfilling. So thank you. And with that, we'll continue in the opening of the eyes treatise, where Nichiren is talking about this process of Gohonzon, this doctrine that's been throughout all of Shakyamuni's teachings, but really focused and made direct through the Lotus method, yeah? He goes on to say, Confucianism preaches filial piety and care for one's parents. There's that connection, right? Another form of that connection, of sense of belonging, being loved, being appreciated, being validated as being. I mean, if there's one leitmotif of humanity, of all phenomena, but certainly the thing that our sentient mind can observe, is this insatiable drive for being and belonging, because that's just another form of being. It's a validation of being. So no wonder we're such egomaniacs, right? Because it's all about validating existence. And then Buddhism comes along, Shakyamuni, and says, yeah, that's all well and good. The problem is there's a psychological component to that craving that then immediately draws you away from the immensity and beauty and magnificence of that being. And that's in trying to collect and anchor your idea of a self in things. You're looking in the wrong spot. You're panicking. Now let's relax and look at being in reference to your momentum. Right? It's happening. And all of us are happening through our own lenses. And time becomes this kind of a fluid thing. It's a referential, it's a measurement thing. But if you're held by that, then you're out of it. You're out of the happening, living, right? Time as a verb rather than a noun. So that sounds all abstract and everything, but that's why it's so hard, so many words to try to communicate this shift, this phase shift, in our mind. So Confucianism speaks a lot about interpersonal relationships, social constructs, filial piety, which is, Japanese are no strangers to that either. They're very strong in that ancestry thing, lineage, Whereas Buddhism's more immediate. Yeah, it respects all of that, but the lineage, the ancestry, the community, the structure is valid now as an experience. Relying on it as a previous structure really doesn't nurture your being, but respecting it as something that gives form to your experience, that's useful. See things, it's this slide of experience, time, being, momentum. So, Confucianism preaches or teaches filial piety and care for one's parents. Valid. But it is limited to this present life. In other words, the respect you have for your father and mother is based on a ceremony kind of a thing. Is it a living, breathing thing? It provides no way for one to assist one's parents in their future lives. How will you honor your parents once they've passed away? Well, they don't exist anymore. But they do exist. Their energy, their karma exists within your moment-to-moment continuing life. So they still can be honored and appreciated as karmic components of momentum, your momentum. Your momentum now being, more accurately, not just you individually identity, but you identity comprehensive amalgam. Do you see? This is, again, leading to that idea that we're not separate. We're just these little focal points of light in a mist of photons of light. We're not disconnected. We're not individual. We're bright spots within. See the connectivity? And the Confucian sages and worthies are therefore sages and worthies in name only and not in reality, because they've been cut off as entities in time that are no longer. Whereas karmically, we understand as Buddhists, there's shared energies that we maintain, even though they, in their samsaric existence, are gone. I'm not talking about spirit or soul or essence or any of that. No, I'm talking scientifically here that when we're born, remember this example, right? In the popular science, biology, mind of birth, human birth, we think of sperm, cell, the two get together, boom, spawn child. But as Buddhists, we know better than that. We know there's more going on in that, because we think about energy manifesting, right? Karmic. So that child, that up to be born child, is a third component. The sperm momentum of the male, the cell, the momentum, the egg, the cell of the momentum of the female, join. They're mixing around with themselves all the time. When does a child happen, though? When does actual fertilization happen? Only when that third component, you or your child or any human, enters in with that karmic impetus to mix all three. And this is why children always have some components of their mother, some components of their father, but obviously components that are of neither, that they develop on their own. This is part of the, I would argue, the trauma of teenage years, sorting that out, establishing some and being ignorant of others. But this is the story of human existence, the development of the sentient mind to become aware that we are not just daddy karma and mommy karma. We are daddy, mommy, and self karma. We are the momentum of varied energies come together and now expressing in experience the results of that amalgam. So, just as that is true, so true is that when our actual parent dies, their momentum, their life, their instantiation, done, extinct. But not only do we share in their karmic, because it's part of the energies we are manifesting, but our relationship with them has imprinted on the whole mix, the entire amalgam of who we are reinstantiating every moment to moment to moment to moment. So why would we cut off an arm, in other words, when they die, right? We don't stop having the arm. So our relationship with that karma continues, but not that person. This is very confusing to people, and it shouldn't be. It's very obvious. This is why we have ceremonies to honor those who've passed away, not because we're going to affect them in the clouds in the sky. Them no longer exists outside of their karmic contribution and our intermix with that karma, still extant in our lives. This is where we communicate with. Just as we communicate with our own amalgam of karma when we chant. This is what we're doing. We're enlivening our clarity of understanding of this tremendous momentum of energies of which we're an amalgam, still interconnected within ourselves and without ourselves, outside of ourselves, in other words. because environment and self, not separate, interacting constantly. Can't have one without the other. It's a very deep concept of Buddhism that often gets walked right by. Just because it's difficult to talk about, but it's essential to understand. It is part of the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment. So, back to Nichiren. Brahmanism, though it recognizes the existence of past and future connectivity, right? Similarly, offers no means to assist one's parents to a better life in the future. The wording of this is really affected by translation bias. You hear it, right? It insists on trying to talk about lives as though they are like incarnations. What we have to know, please get it clear in your mind, whether you use the word incarnation or not, what you're really talking about in Buddhism is the instantiation of the whole potential in the next moment. It's a moment-to-moment, 3,000 realms in a single thought moment. This is why it's so important, and Nichiren harps upon it all the time. So this language, it's not accurate. It's more confusing in its simplicity than if it just tried to say it outright. Buddhism alone can do so, and thus it is the true way of sages and worthies. To understand this point is essential. But in the Hinayana and Mahayana sutras preached before the Lotus Sutra, and in the schools based on those earlier sutras, to gain the way even for oneself is impossible. There's a clue right there. To gain the Buddha way even for yourself, if you don't understand that you, as an identity, samsaric, are actually just a fulcrum, a point within the whole that shares inexorably in your mixture of cellular development, your moment-to-moment instantiations of karma, is not singular. It's an amalgam of not only the three as obvious in birth, but in your inner mix throughout your entire life with others whose karma influence and whose karma you influence back, and your environment. It's a constantly fluid, roiling activity. We call it life. You're never a solo identity. You're always an admixture of your experiences moment to moment to moment to moment. And in the Lotus Sutra, that's made explicit. That makes sense? One can hardly hope to do anything for one's parents either. If you see them as a separate thing, not outside of yourself, then your influence is just noise. But when you inculcate their existence, then you are directly influencing. Do you see the mixture, the amalgam? Though the text of these sutras may say that they bring about enlightenment, in reality, this is not the case. They're pointing to it, but they don't bring it about. Only with the preaching of the Lotus Sutra, in which the Dragon King's daughter attained Buddhahood, did it become evident that the attainment of Buddhahood was a possibility for all mothers. Yeah, see, we tend to think about, the Dragon King's daughter, again, as a singular thing, but it's not. It's a story, an expedient means to explicate a potential that extrapolates from that example to all women, all mothers, right? all daughters of mothers, femininity. And when it was revealed that even an evil man such as Devadatta could attain Buddhahood, it became evident that Buddhahood was a possibility for all fathers. The Lotus Sutra is the classic of filial piety, of Buddhism. This ends my discussion of the two admonitions contained in the Devadatta chapter. That's really profound. It's summed up pretty quickly here. Nichiren continues, awed by the 5 proclamations of the Buddha made in the Treasure Tower and Devadatta chapters, the countless bodhisattvas promised the Buddha that they would propagate the Lotus Sutra as described in the Encouraging Devotion chapter. You see how the Lotus Sutra is like an operator's manual for your Gohonzon mind to experience Buddha. Every chapter has its descriptive function to understand, to inculcate, and to actuate, to realize Gohonzon. I will hold up this passage of the sutra like a bright mirror so that all may see how the present-day monks of Zen, precepts, and Nembutsu schools and their lay supporters are guilty of slandering the law. Because they deny this very aspect of Shakyamuni's essential teaching, his ultimate teaching, the Lotus. On the 12th day of the 9th month of last year, between the hours of the rat and the ox, this person named Nichiren was beheaded. He's talking about the Tatsunokuchi persecution where they were about to behead him. Shijo Kingo was there, many, many witnesses, right? Some kind of atmospheric event happened that spooked everyone, and they decided instead, well, if we can't kill him, let's send him to Sado Island, right, where he'll die of starvation or the elements or whatever. But so what Nichiren is saying is, on that day, my provisional status as an annoying monk called Nichiren, I shed that identity. I myself, Nichiren, shed that identity. And I realized that I wasn't just a loudmouth smartass who was well-educated and knew what I thought I knew, but that my mission was now much greater than my talent. That my mission was, in fact, the very thing that was foretold by Shakyamuni had to happen in this time. That my responsibility far outweighed my human form. That what I was doing was far more important and much grander than my ego, my identity. I went from being Nichiren the monk to Nichiren the votary of the Lotus Sutra. Much more important. Right? It is his identity. It says soul here. Gosh, I hate that. I really need to get rid of that. His identity that has come to this island of Sado, and in the 2nd month of the following year, snowbound, is writing this to send to his close disciples, this opening of the eyes. The description of the evil age in the Encouraging Devotion chapter seems terrible, but one who cares nothing about oneself for the sake of the law has nothing to be frightened about. If you carry the truth, instead of saying, me, I'm the truth, but the truth is the truth, I'm just pointing it out, others reading it will be terrified. This scriptural passage is the bright mirror that Shakyamuni, many treasures, and the Buddhas of the 10 directions left for the future of Japan, and in which the present state of the country is reflected. It may also be regarded as a keepsake from me. This is an important treatise that he's putting down for history's sake to identify that Nichiren, the fisherman's son, ain't what this is about now. We've transcended this. I now identify my efforts from here on in, as long as I may live, to be in the service of the teaching of the Lotus Sutra, the Myoho Renge Kyo. That is my very existence, right? The encouraging devotion chapter states, quote, "We beg you not to worry. After the Buddha has passed into extinction, in an age of fear and evil, we will preach far and wide. There will be many ignorant people who will curse and speak ill of us and will attack us with swords and staves, but we will endure all of these things. In that evil age, there will be monks with perverse wisdom and hearts that are fawning and crooked, who will suppose that they have attained what they have not attained, being proud and boastful in heart. Or there will be forest-dwelling monks, wearing clothing of patched rags and living in retirement, who will claim that they are practicing the true way, despising and looking down on all humankind. Greedy for profit and support, they will preach the law to white-robed laymen and will be respected and revered by the world as though they were arhats who possessed the 6 transcendental powers. These men, with evil in their hearts, constantly thinking of worldly affairs, will borrow the name of forest-dwelling monks and take delight in proclaiming our faults. Because in the midst of the great assembly they constantly try to defame us, they will address the rulers, high ministers, Brahmins, and householders, as well as the other monks, slandering and speaking ill of us, saying, 'These are men of perverted views who preach non-Buddhist doctrines.' In a muddled kalpa, in an evil age, there will be many things to fear. Evil demons will take possession of others, and through them curse, revile, and heap shame on us. The evil monks of that muddled age, failing to understand the Buddha's expedient means, how he preaches the law in accordance with what is appropriate, will confront us with foul language and angry frowns. Again and again, we will be banished," end quote. So that's a quote from the Lotus Sutra, right? Of these bodhisattvas who want to take on the mission of votary of the ultimate teachings of Shakyamuni. And what they're pointing to here, because I've had this read to me as though people will misunderstand that, they're talking about, remember, the person, do not follow the person, follow the law. These exhortations in the Lotus Sutra, this statement by the Bodhisattvas is that in this age, this muddled age, right, that those who practice Myoho Renge Kyo fervently, truly, will have to endure from laymen, monks, other sects, leaders of all sort, the slings and arrows of personal attack, right? They'll sneer at us. Right? I can quote it all over that statement. That's not an attack on the teaching. It's an attack on the person. Follow the law, not the person. So, when I'm railing about those who misunderstand and misuse the teachings, I'm not saying Frank over there, watch out for him. It doesn't even feel right hearing that come out of my mouth. It's always about Myoho Renge Kyo. It's always about the law. Right? Nichiren doesn't shy away from pointing out even his superiors, quote unquote, in the society, that they're not practicing correctly. And he proves it. He shows it. But he's not saying Chikaku, yeah, he's an unkempt this and that, what or that. Nichiren doesn't name call, right? His basis is always in the teaching itself. And he backs it up with quotations. So don't misunderstand that whole paragraph as an admonition for anyone who has criticism. Criticism's okay, as long as it's based on the teaching, the true teaching of Myoho Renge-kyo. It's a compassionate thing to correct somebody who misunderstands the teaching. Right? Even Devadatta, somebody totally deluded in the teachings, is shown by Shakyamuni to, at some point, wake the hell up and understand he's going to have a huge revelation one day, and he too will attain enlightenment. He's very well educated in the Buddhist expedient means. It's just the one day when he gets that renge, right? That'll change everything. It's how we all are, right? Where are we time-wise? Okay, a little further. The 8th volume of the annotations on the words and phrases of the Lotus Sutra comments as follows. In this passage, 3 types of arrogance are cited. First, there is a section that exposes people of mistaken views. Exactly what I was just saying. This represents the arrogance and presumption of lay people. Next, there is a section that exposes the arrogance and presumption of members of the Buddhist clergy. Yeah, they're humans too, right? Many of you have had experience with sects or lay organizations that have been excommunicated, and always it comes down to ego. Some identification of arrogance and right person. Third is a section that exposes the arrogance and presumption of those who pretend to be sages. What does that mean? Pretend to be sages, right? Who walk about with a certain amount of knowledge, thinking that knowledge privileges them with others. Stature. What difference does stature make? Enlightenment is something all of us attain whenever we desire to, when we focus ourselves on to Buddhahood. What stature is above that? What a silly thing to be preoccupied with, right? We're all just sentient minds, absolutely equal in our potential for Gohonzon mind, yeah, for experiencing Buddhahood. Of these 3, the first can be endured. We're all ignorant at some point or other. The second exceeds the first. You ought to know better. And the third is the most formidable of all, the arrogance of stature. That's a really talk about craving. That's a tough one to break, because it's usually structured, right, within the society. But he's a this. He's just a man. She's just a woman. All of us are simply bodhisattvas working on our enlightenment, sharing this universe. This is because the second and the third ones are increasingly harder to recognize for what they really are. It's easy to say, Juno over there, she knows a lot, but, she's just practicing. But when you meet somebody who has a a big church or a big building and an organization around them, and they're publishing things, and they walk around as everybody's like putting red carpets in front of them and so forth. Boy, we humans, we love the pomp and circumstance, don't we? And for some reason, that very mechanism, ego, makes us feel as though that person must be more accomplished, must be more important. There is no difference, but it's harder to penetrate that matrix of illusion, right? So that's what he's pointing out here. The Dharma teacher Chi Tu writes in the Tung Shun, quote, "First, regarding the verse section that begins with, 'There will be many arrogant people,' the first part tells how the votaries of the Lotus Sutra must endure evils inflicted by the body, mouth, mind of their opponents. This refers to non-Buddhists and the evil or the misguided, I hate that word evil, misguided lay Buddhists. They just don't know, they haven't developed their understanding of Buddhism much yet, so they're swayed easily by opinions and groupings and coddling, blah, blah, blah. Ego. The next part that begins with, 'in that deluded age,' deals with arrogant members of the Buddhist clergy, right? Which is what Nichiren's, most of his writings are about. These other great teachers who are, in tight with the shogunate or elite families. They're privileged. Society privileges them, and they own it. Boy, do they own it. Yeah? But they crumble in debate when it comes to Nichiren. But societally, still formidable forces, yeah? The third part that begins with, 'or there will be forest-dwelling monks,' so on, deals with the members of the clergy who pretend to be sages and use their positions so that they can act as leaders of all the other misguided people. The politics, the politicians. And the same text goes on to say, quote, the section that begins, 'because in the midst of the great assembly,' describes how these men will appeal to the government authorities, slandering the law and its practitioners. Now it's totally political, right? Power brokers. And you and I reading this are thinking, well, what the hell does that have anything to do with Buddhism or chanting or what Shakyamuni is teaching? How did we get off on this, right? And there it is in the Lotus Sutra, in a 3,000-year-old teaching. Shakyamuni could see this is human nature, nothing new. Different circumstance, different day, different society, same thing, same behavior, all based on this craving, me, right? The monkey mind. In the 9th volume of the Nirvana Sutra, we read, quote, "Good man, there are ichantikas, or persons of incorrigible disbelief. They pretend to be arhats, living in deserted places and speaking slanderously of the correct and equal sutras of the great vehicle. When ordinary people see them, they all suppose that they are true arhats and speak of them as great bodhisattvas. They don't know any better. They're ignorant. It might be their first exposure." It also says, quote, "At that time, this sutra will be widely propagated throughout Jambudvipa. In that age, there will be misguided monks who will steal this sutra and divide it into many parts, losing the color, scent, and flavor of the correct teaching that it contains." They'll pick and choose the parts that they want to be masters of and control others with, right? Always this power dynamic, ego. These misguided men, I really like misguided instead of evil. It's so much more accurate to our understanding, right? These misguided men will read and recite the sutra, but they will ignore and put aside the profound and vital principles that the Thus Come One has expounded in it, and replace them with ornate rhetoric and meaningless talk. They will tear off the first part of the sutra and stick it on the end. They'll tear off the end and put it in the beginning. They'll put the end in the beginning, in the middle, and the middle at the beginning of the end. You must understand that these misguided monks are the companions of, he says devil, but Darakutenamau, the very energy that drags us toward avarice, our greed, our stupidity, our manipulative nature, right? The 6th-volume Parinirvana Sutra, states, quote, there are also Ichantikas who resemble arhats, but who commit misguided deeds. There are also arhats who resemble Ichantikas, but display merciful hearts. The Ichantikas who look like arhats spend their time slandering the correct and equal sutras to the populace. The arhats who look like Ichantikas, on the other hand, are critical of the voice hearers, the Shravakas, and go about preaching the correct and equal sutras. They address the populace saying, quote, you and I are all bodhisattvas. Why? Because each living being possesses the Buddha nature. But the populace will probably call such men Ichantikas. So that was a confusing bit of word salad there, right? I mean, these are words that you and I might be comfortable hearing, but the context is very important. So it is true that you are and I are bodhisattvas from beneath the earth. Whether we express and actually practice to engage our bodhisattva nature and discover our Gohonzon, our Buddha mind, our Buddha way, well, that's not automatic. That takes efforts. We all know that. So we can't just idly, you're not going to go see your neighbor tomorrow or a friend of yours and go, by the way, I just heard I'm a bodhisattva. You wouldn't have the arrogance to do that, would you? So understand within context what's being said here. I'm going to pause there because I really want you to get this. This is I think a part of the Lotus Sutra that, number one, I think it's used improperly by people who want that confusion to continue because it gives them some kind of power. But it's important for you. I want you to understand, as I desperately wanted to understand, what is this? Because it's translation bias. So what's the message in here? So one thing we can take away from all of that is that there's a recognition in this teaching that humans are incredibly complex, that we can be a variety of different manifestations of the same kind of mix of confusion, yeah? We can look like Ichantikas, we can look like arhats, we can pick and choose in our rhetoric, in the way we speak, in our thoughts, how we're going to utilize our practice. And I really got that from the Immeasurable Meanings Sutra, the intro to the Lotus Sutra. Because in the Immeasurable Meanings, we're confronted constantly with these immeasurable, innumerable. That whole sutra is about the potential of life, of humans, of sentient minds. They're uncountable. Potential has no limit. And it can take forms and mutate constantly. 3,000 realms in a single thought moment. That's not an Immeasurable Meaning Sutra. But with that in mind, it becomes clear that Shakyamuni is addressing every single possible sentient mind. Therefore, to identify a few, it's kind of a dangerous thing to do, because how can you identify them all? It's impossible. But within the context of the Threefold Lotus Sutra teachings, we're already cautioned that it's impossible to enumerate every potential, right? But certainly there's a few that we can identify as kind of pointers. People who behave this way, people who behave, we're talking about people. Once again, and I'm sure we're going to come to it in this as we keep going in this Go Show, once again, Nichiren will remind us, as he already has, we need to keep our focus, our practice, our energy, our determination on the law. The persons, people, human beings, sentient minds, they're fluid, right? How many times in your life have you been completely convinced of something, known it to your core, only to have something different happen, a new occurrence, a jarring moment, a trauma, or knock you off your game, knock you off your focus. 3,000 realms in a single thought moment. Yeah. Look at all those potential instantiations in every single thought moment. Yeah. Of course we're going to be distracted. Of course things are going to go through our minds and what the heck was that? But we have to continue to circle back. Come back. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. This is where the answer is. Buddhahood. Oh, okay. It's the nature of our sentient minds, our protracted experience of time. Ultimately, the more we do it, the more even those distractions we can then handle as less destabilizing. Oh, that old thing's showing itself. It's just karma. It's energy expressing itself. Does it need to completely overwhelm you? It doesn't need to. It's a matter of your mental position. And what keeps you clear? The law, the Myoho Renge Kyo, the actual functioning, constantly instantiating engine of life. If you experience from that place, then how can you be shocked or destabilized? Because you always see clearly. That's our goal, right? And in that, I'm no better than you. You know better than I. We will have our moments. Better? It's kind of irrelevant, right? Thank you. Thank you for understanding that. Thank you for your dedicated practice. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. It's a Bodhisattva act. If you can make use of the free materials on threefoldlotus.com, as well as the links to ebooks, which, as I said before, are going to be listed on threefoldlotus.com, but they won't be listed on the Lulu. You know what? Give me your opinion on that. I've been trying to keep the Lulu.com as a print store where you can get print books. There's a few. I have experimented in the past with ebooks on there, but it never worked out really well. So I thought, well, I'll keep that for print. And then on threefoldlotus.com, I'll list the books I want to offer for electronic, PDF or ebook, whatever. But let me know what you think. A lot of you have purchased those ebooks, and I'm very grateful for that, and I'm so happy that it's a resource that's working for you guys. But at the same time, if you think there'd be a benefit to just going ahead and making those available through the lulu.com book, because that's where eventually you're going to transact to get them anyway, maybe I shouldn't keep them apart. I'm just trying to make things clear, you know? You don't go in a library expecting to reach up on a shelf and pull an electronic version of something. It's my old mind, right? My old pattern. That books are books and ebooks are ebooks. I'm trying to keep them separate, but maybe that's silly. Give me your comments on that. I'd like to hear what you have to say. In the meantime, keep your practice up. Take care of your health, right? It's all about your practice, the resource, the podcast, the everything. So make use of it. Like and subscribe. Patrons. I can't say enough about you guys. You keep this thing afloat, along with those of you who are buying, books. So thank you for that, and I'll see you in the next one. We'll keep going with this Go Show. Okay? Bye for now.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up! It's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no friend to me. It's not working out, maybe it's the chemistry. It's